Okay, so I'm going to give a rundown of my reads for the month of December 2025 and then go into a bit on what I plan to read for the month of January 2026. Yesterday, I finished one of the greatest literary works, particularly of the 19th century, of Russian literature. That is none other than Eugene Onegin by Alexander Pushkin. Not at all the thing that I expected to read. I had read A Hero of Our Time by Lermontov, and I had this strange feeling when I was reading that. I was thinking the whole time, and this is not to say I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed it a little bit more after the fact, but during the time I was reading it, I just had this thought. I was like, why aren't I just reading Eugene Onegin? Because isn't the commentary quite similar, but a little bit more enjoyable because Pushkin is so easy to read, very enjoyable to read, quite enticing. And this translator pulls no punches. I believe his name is Charles Johnston. So it's a bit of a tall order to translate Pushkin in general into English because you lose a lot of the idiosyncrasies of Russian. But Vladimir Nabokov, great man that he is, had translated Eugene Onegin very literally back in the day, which you might think is not exactly to task for him. You'd think he would do something a bit more poetic and true to Pushkin and give him a more balanced translation of both something literary, something poetic. But I think he does it for the express reason to allow people like Charles Johnson to take that literal translation and make that creative leap into something more poetic. And he does cool. I found that he did quite a fantastic job. I was reading through this like nothing. Of course I don't read any Russian. I don't know anything about the original Pushkin. I've tried to read it. My level is just not there. I mean, I think it will take me years to get to that point where I can read Pushkin comfortably without assistance. It's just not there. But I've read a few other translations of Eugene Onegin when I was first starting to read this one, and I found this one just more to my own taste, I guess. And I felt that the translations that he made were superior than what the other one I was reading. I failed to remember the translator. But Charles Johnson does a pretty great job in this. And on the content of the story itself, some of the strangest things occur in this. There is this dream sequence with Tatiana in the countryside, and she's like in this battling this bear, which is absolutely. As an aside, there's this thing with the Russians and the bears. I thought that was like a joke. Like, I thought that was like just fucking around. The more I read Russian, the more I learn Russian history. This bear thing is no joke. Peter the Great was training bears to like give people drinks and like to like skin them alive. I don't think that's true. If there's something he does with the bears, where he strips people. He strips people with the bears. He trains the bears to strip people. I didn't know bears were like this. You can train them like that. I was absolutely astounded when I read this bear sequence. Like, it chases her through the snow-covered fields, and she walks into this house. Very nice, very, very Nutcracker-esque. She goes into this house full of animals, and then Eugene's there, the host of the party, and I think they like want to kill her. And he goes, "No, guys, relax." So it was so strange. I mean, it was so lovely. I really, really, really enjoy things like that, and these little gems that you never hear about this. When I was looking people talk about Eugene Onegin, nothing about that at all. Although, I suppose my reading was cursory. I mean, I don't go that much into depth about the book, and I've read a few essays, but no one talks about that. I mean, the content itself is not as impressive as the actual poetry that Pushkin achieves in Eugene Onegin. It's just, and also I just found the character of Vladimir Linsky so intriguing. It's like Pushkin looks into a mirror of his old self, and he just presents it to you without shame. He's proud, embarrassed. He's looking at his old cringe posts. I mean, it's just beautiful. I think that everyone can learn so much from that, especially now that I feel people are getting more and more adverse to expressing their own creativity for the sake of reserving their precious character. But it's like you have to sacrifice your image to make something great, because you have to make bad things. You have to make things that are bad. You have to make things that are so sickly romantic that you just look back and you think you knew nothing about life. You knew nothing about life, and you sing and you praise all these concepts that don't really exist the way that you think that they do. And it's so tragic when he kills him off like that. You died for nothing. You wrote for nothing. You want that. You wrote for nothing that you understood. Not the way you ought to have understood it. And you died for nothing. And the thing that I find really odd about that, I don't know if that's exactly the thing that Pushkin meant. I don't think it is, because Pushkin sort of does the same thing in his real life. He marries this beautiful lady, Natalia. He marries this chick. He's like super in love. He has like what, like I think he has like $3 with her, at least 2 that I know of. And she's like always, she cheats on him. I don't know how many times I think she does it multiple times, but there's just this one time that really does it for Pushkin. The fateful duel that seals his fate. He gets killed in honoring his wife who cheated on him with this guy. I don't know how many duels he fought in her honor. That's the only one that I know of. So obviously, and especially being the poet that he is, he makes quite a few jabs at poets. It's very funny. It was such a fascinating commentary, because I took away from it something I think he probably didn't intend for people to take from it. Or maybe he did subconsciously. I don't want to get too much into the theory of it, but I thought it was interesting. Also, on the character himself, the titular character himself, Eugene, I found myself having nothing to say. I mean, obviously he's complex, he's a lot like Tatiana in the way that they live in their own world, but he's had more liberty to indulge that as a man of the time. Anyway, everything that I found in him, I found in Tatiana in much more abundance and more appeal. I love Tatiana very much. If this book was not about Eugene Onegin, it would be about me and my pursuit of her. She is just absolutely so captivating. I think a lot of modern women will see themselves in a character like that. I feel like a lot of people in the Western world, I don't know. In the Western world, I think people would feel very imprisoned by that position and would want to find their own escapism in literature that she does. I think she reads mostly, I can't remember. I think she reads both romance and like philosophical texts. I don't remember exactly. I had the names of the authors, but Pushkin goes into more detail, of course. But I think she, again, I don't want to get into this theory thing. This is sort of an aside. There's this thing that Carl Jung talks about at the, what does he say? The intrinsic introvert, I believe it's called, where you'll never find these people at the present who they are in their very position, because they're always elsewhere in their mind and always seeking some sort of other, internal validation, maybe not validation is not the correct word, but they're elsewhere. Like you see, these kind of people who you see them, they're here in front of you physically, but they're wandering. They're not with you. They're with themselves somewhere else. And I think that's what Tatiana is. She's always, and I think you get that from her dream sequence, she's always exploring in her own mind. And it's really sad, and you do feel the sort of languish that Eugene Onegin feels at the end of the book, because you know that she does this, and now she's in this position of the married Muscovite wife, in the higher society. The roles she fits splendidly well. She's very good at it, and people do adore her. But like you see, she lacks that former ardor that she had in the countryside. And I mean, it's said explicitly. She just doesn't like it to be there. She's not a fan. I don't know how she feels about her husband. I think she's like okay with him. But I mean, there's so much to say. I'm focusing on the content, but the poetry, of course. I mean, the translator does a brilliant job, I think. And perhaps I'll read another translation, and one day, if I don't die before then, I'll read the original, and then I'll synthesize how I feel about this translation in more depth. But that's Eugene Oregon for now. I really do implore that you read it. What a book. The Viking edition hosts the Johnston translation. I suggest maybe you try that. But there's an online translation who I don't know who translates it. I don't remember the name. Anyway, next book. The classic You Know It, You Love It, Woe from Wit by Alexander Griboyev. And excuse me for the translation. I'm not going to correct it one day. Alexander Griboyev. Grib means mushroom. I believe his name means mushroom eater. I believe it does, but I very well could be wrong. Anyway, what a book. What a book. So much can be said about this. So much can be said about the author. I'll go into a little bit of detail. So much can be said about the translation. I mean, that's the thing. When you have a work in Russian and you translate it to English, especially a work in verse, you just have so many challenges. And I see time and time again when translators describe the process of translating something, and from Russian poetically to English poetically, it's just they approach it with so much humility. They almost like lacerate themselves when they talk about the process, because you can't really you lose a lot. You lose a lot, and you have to make a concerted effort to keep the meter, keep the rhythm, and keep true to what's being said. It's just such a challenge. And fun fact, Old English used to have cases, but it has since been discarded. I mean, this says probably a lot about the speakers of Old English. They just discarded it, thought it completely unnecessary. Well, the Russians kept it. I mean, of course, the linguistic roots are a little bit different, but even still, I mean, I found that I never knew that until I started learning Russian. I actually never knew the content of cases in general. What a thing to learn. I mean, what a thing to learn indeed. I mean, it's absolutely horrible, but what a beautiful language. It's worth every second. Anyway, so I want to get into Griboyev for a minute. He is a very interesting character. I believe he was something of like a child prodigy. He used to play the piano. He knew, I think, German, English, French. It does go into a bit of detail all the languages that he knew as a child, but he was a really brilliant kid, and his parents, they paid up for their kids' education, and it was worth every penny for Alexander Griboyev, because he is such a brilliant man, and he was a contemporary of Pushkin's. I believe he was affiliated with the Decembrists. However, he was not at all involved with any of their activity. He sort of just was guilty by association, and I think this is all I can recall. It's probably not all correct, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think it describes enough about what you need to know about him as an author. So anyway, he is prosecuted by the Tsar, and he's given the chance to either go to Persia or America for exile. I don't know. I think this is a temporary exile, just like to get him out of your hair, like a punitive measure, just to tell him like you stop fucking around with the Decembrists or whatever. So it's like, yeah, I'll go to Persia, which I find a bit offensive. I don't know. I think he could have. Would the Americans have liked him? I don't know the attitude of Russians in America at the time, but if he wanted to come, I mean, I would have welcomed him with open arms. I mean, obviously I was not there, but anyway, he goes to Persia. It doesn't matter. He goes to Persia. And he has a lot of friends there, probably which is why he goes to Persia, because he knows people there who are stationed in Persia. And there's this particular fellow who's quite the tyrant. I mean, he's awful to the people of Persia, and he treats them horribly. And well, anyway, at any rate, he makes a few works there when he's at the Caucasus, and he becomes gradually more known. I think in general, though, he was always kind of like a known figure, but he gradually increases his esteem, and Pushkin always has recognized him as like he's that guy. He's the fella you want to keep an eye out for, and he proves him right ultimately when he publishes Wolfram Wood. I believe he publishes it from. He begins to write it in St. Petersburg, I believe, and then publishes it from the Caucasus. I think that's what occurs. Don't quote me. No, what it is he finishes it in Moscow is what happens. I think he begins in Persia, and then he finishes it in Moscow. I know for a fact he finishes it in Moscow. And he gets a hard time actually circulating it. I mean, people want to read it. People want to read it and are absolutely thrilled by it. But obviously not too favored by the government. They don't want a lot of people reading this. However, he does manage to see it performed in his lifetime, which is absolutely must have been a treat. I mean, really. I'm currently watching this 1977 TV film. I don't know, it's called TV Spectacle, I think. I don't know. That is pretty much the play-by-play of this book, the performance. And I'll get into that later, but I was just saying, this fella is quite the guy, and as his parents spared no expense to get him educated, I spared no expense to get this bilingual edition of Wolfram Wood. It is worth every penny. I will be going back to this over and over and over again. There's so many, like, the thing about this is there's so many phrases, very, as Shakespeare captures a lot of quick phrases, so too does Gribaudev. A lot of the things he says here are commonly recognized in the Russian lexicon. A little bit not used practically. I think most of the things are used like ironically, as you might say something Shakespearean in English, but I think this will definitely come in handy to any Russian language learner. I really do think it will. And I think I will be going back over and over again to this book. Anyway, on the content itself, great, absolutely great fun. Characters, I love this sort of caricaturesque portrayal. I think it's something that is lost in the now modern realism. I love this, like, but he toes the line, of course. It's not exactly like so dramatic. Sophia, I think, is probably the most dramatic of the main cast. I mean, when I was reading this, I had such a different impression of her than when I was watching the TV play. I mean, it was just so... it could have just been the actress or my own interpretation. But I think the actress does, though, do a more splendid job of it, of course, and probably is more true to what is happening in the text. Because this Sophia character, what a dreamer. I really... I think contrasting her with her father, Famazov, who I absolutely adore, this man. What some of the greatest words, some of the greatest lines, some of the greatest not really soliloquies, but his own dialogue by himself. I guess that is soliloquy by definition. I mean, don't kill me over this. But he's really such fun to read. I mean, you just read The Scolding Father. It's just a lot of fun. If I were to play any character in this, it would be him. Granted, I don't like the way he, I don't like that groping scene with Liza. Not at all to my taste, but, I mean, it does what it does for his character. It describes the sort of man that he is. And it does offer a valid critique of the whole serfdom altogether. I mean, Liza, I really do enjoy her character. I didn't expect to like her so much, but she really was captivating, and I think that's the thing is she was kind of the smartest character of the whole book. She knows everything, and that's sort of the point, right? Like even Chatsky, and he's in his witty ways, he sort of lacks the sort of like the down to earth, like real in touch reality that someone like Liza, the serf, would have. And she's smart and she's beautiful, and we love Liza. We love Liza. Chatsky, I want to get into. I don't know how I feel about him. Of course, I mean, he says some of the greatest things, doesn't he? He just when Chatsky talks, you listen. You do listen. And what fun it is when everybody says he's just descended into madness. Oh my god, that was so funny. Man, just seeing that whole thing, like, unravel. You know exactly what's gonna happen, too. It's just... And then the ending, where he just completely just tears into the Famazovs, like, absolutely brilliant. Really, really great stuff. I mean, I was so in love with this. The whole time it was just a lot of fun. I really, really love this. I think if you are at all interested in 19th century Russian high society culture, this is absolutely a must. I mean, anything in terms of Russian literature, you actually really must read this. I did feel a bit disappointed when I finished it, but I will go back. Anyway, those are the two larger texts I had read. I have a couple of short stories here, and I'll get into the one I prefer the least first, which is The Nose by Nikolai Gogol. And I want to start this off by saying Gogol's not my guy. I don't think we would... I won't say that. I think that's... I inherently oppose the absurdism. Like, it does not appeal to me. It just doesn't hit me. This little Penguin's Classic Short Stories book, it holds both the nose and the carriage. I'll just say this forwardly, I prefer the carriage. I don't know if it's because it's shorter and not as absolutely insane, but I preferred it. Though I don't remember much about it. I think it was written okay. I like the way it was written a little bit better, I think. Anyway, I'll get into The Nose. The carriage really is a nothing burger. The Nose, I thought it was an interesting way to poke fun at the hypocrisies of high-ranking officials who really place such a... who engage in life as a Vanity Fair, right? Like, these people... They love their titles, they love their ribbons, they love their... There's this practice, I don't know how related this is. There's this practice in Russia, I think it's called... deployment? What is it called? I can't... It's completely eluding me right now. Deployment... Uniforms... It's like... But that's not what it is, right? Like, it's not when you're deployed. There's another word that begins with a D where you come back from your deployment. And there's this practice where you sort of enrobe yourself in these ribbons and these tightly knit ropes all around your uniform to make it look like you've really achieved something great. And really, it's just these, like, artificial embellishments. And you sort of get that with this main character who... Poor fellow lost his nose. And turns out it was... You don't know what the fuck happened to it, let's be honest. Nobody knows what the fuck happened to this guy's nose. But then the nose starts walking around Moscow. And then all of a sudden it comes back right back into his arms with this police officer. It doesn't really matter what happens to the nose. It's not about the nose. It's I'll just say a favorite part of the story is when he accuses this he's seen this chick. He's seen a lot of chicks, I think. I mean, this guy's a player. He's seen this chick, and then his mom's like, oh yeah, you gotta marry my daughter, you know, it's just what it is. And he's like, I'm not going to marry your daughter. He's not going to marry her daughter. Why would he marry her daughter? He's doing what he likes. So anyway, he accuses her of having taken his nose because, I mean, logically to him, it could be no one else. I mean, we all know who it is. It's said at the beginning of the story who has his nose. So he writes her this nasty letter. I mean, he's really brutal. Not to our standards probably now, but I mean, it's really just impolite. And this poor woman, she writes him back. She's very sympathetic and very, almost pleading him to, not damage her view of her daughter or herself in his eyes. I mean, obviously, and he even says, like, it wasn't her. I mean, clearly not her. She wouldn't be writing this if it were her. So he feels really bad. I think I need to reread this with more context. I think there's some things that I'm just missing with the nose. I will say, though, I did start reading Dead Souls a while back, and it didn't call to me. Like, it's just not my kind of... I didn't really give it the proper amount of time, but I would like to. I'll go back to read it someday, but I think overall Gogol for me doesn't call to me. But I need to read him to get more context. He's very influential. Dostoevsky, actually, I think Dostoevsky references the nose in Crime and Punishment. Don't quote me. I think he does. Anyway, last but most certainly not least, I could sing the praises of this author to the moon and back on what very little of him I've read. Ivan Turgenev. Not his name at all, but that's how we Americans say it, and I'll change it someday, but for now, I'm not at that level. Kazan from the Beautiful Lands. I think this is the work that changed, like, something, like, just seeing this here, like, it just, like a mechanism in my heart just turns on, like, oh my god. Anyway, before I get into the Kazan Beautiful Lands, which I will get to it, and I will go into great detail about a story that's like 10 pages long. I would like to talk about the first short story in this little Penguins Classic book is The District Doctor. And I'll tell you, they were smart to put this in the front. The District Doctor is about... Well, it opens with this man. He's in the countryside. He's sick. I can't remember what it is he's sick with. He's got, like, the flu. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter. So he's sick. He goes to this hospital. He's like, I'm not feeling well. Give me a doctor. Give a doctor. This guy comes in. He's, like, talking to this doctor. He's like, yeah, you got to do such and such a thing, and then you'll feel better by such and such a time. He's about to leave. The doctor's about to leave. And he goes, hey, come back. I'm sick here. I don't know anyone here. I gotta talk to you. I'm gonna lose my mind. So just stay and let's have a cup of tea or whatever. I mean, the doctor, I guess he indulges. He's like, whatever. I'll indulge you and then we'll sit and have a chat. And, oh my god, Turnikin says this line. I had to write this down somewhere. I have a Zibaldone, and I'll probably put it in there. I mean, it was just such a... It's not, like, the most profound, but, like, after you read the story and then you go back and they sort of, like... It could just be that he calls to me in particular, but I found it so nice to hear. So I'm just looking for it. I think this is it. Strange things happen on this earth. You can live a long while with someone and be in the friendliest terms, and yet you'll never want to talk openly with him from the depths of your soul, while with someone else you may scarcely have met, at one glance, whether you to him or he to you, just as in a confessional, you'll blurt out the story of your life. And what a story the doctor tells him. This doctor tells him the story about how he was called to the countryside to cure this dying girl. So... The wage is meager. Like, you really don't get anything. He gets next to nothing from having treating this girl, but he's like, she's dying, she's a girl. I'll just go there, save a young girl's life. I mean, we're Christians. Whatever, I don't know. That's his rationale. I mean, he's a good guy. And he goes there, and it's just a brutal journey. I mean, the carriage gets stuck in the mud multiple times. I think it starts snowing, and it's absolutely freezing cold. So he goes into this host family's house to, he greets them. They're very splendid people from the countryside, of course. It's going to be splendid. Just very pleasant. Very courteous. And they are very aware of, he came here for next to nothing, just for the goodness of his own heart. So he goes to see this girl, and very sickly, but, he's like, she's a very beautiful girl. I feel absolutely horrible to see a beautiful young girl whose life is getting robbed of her. She's dying. I mean, it's tragic. And, of course, he falls in love with this girl. But he doesn't say a word of it. He sort of just goes on treating her and staying for an extended period of time, much longer than he ought to, really. And he's fully aware that what he's doing, his treatments are ineffective. But he tells the girl, her family, says, hey, she'll be alright, give her a couple of days, let her rest. But she's dying. She's obviously dying. And she knows it. There's a moment where it's just the two of them, and she's telling him, just tell me. And he just cannot tell her. He really just can't bear it. And, despite that, they keep going on and play cards together. I think they play chess. The language of love. Anyway. And just one day she's like, I know, and I love you. I know I'm dying and I love you. Which of course is like, come on. This guy's like, fuck. She's dying, she loves me. I know that she was going to say that, and I know she probably doesn't mean it. We, the audience, we don't really know if she means it or not, of course. This is a complete stranger to us, but... And she's a young girl, probably never experienced, this sort of, love in her life, and you might as well try before you die. So, anyway, they embrace, they kiss, I think they kiss, and, I believe the next morning, the mother walks in, and she's in his arms, and they're embracing each other. They don't kick out the doctor, they keep him there until she dies. I'm just trying to remember what the mother's reaction was initially. I think she's offended, if I remember correctly. I think mostly she's when you see that in her position, it's pretty much a confirmation that your daughter's dying. It's pretty much she's 1 foot in the grave at that point. She wouldn't have done that. That would not have occurred if she weren't on her last legs. But anyway, the girl dies. It's really tragic. And after that happens, we come back to our fellow's in the hospital over a cup of tea, and the sick guy's like, wow, damn, what's going on? What? And the doctor's like, oh yeah, she died. And, of course, your reaction is to be like, well, where are you now? How has this, it must have shaped you in some way. This guy's like, I'm live my life, I got a wife, hey, women can't live with them, can't live without them, hey, she's back at home, thankfully I'm not hearing her in my ear, you know what I'm saying? And then that pretty much ends the story. So I think that was really, what a real account. This shit happens every day, honestly, it really does. We just keep on trucking. And that's what that doctor, the district doctor, he just keeps on trucking. He does say some really, really beautiful stuff about this girl, though. It's really nice. Not to say I don't say then that he disregards her. He obviously still loves her and does justice to her memory, but he can't really anger himself into that moment forever. It'll just destroy him completely, which is understandable. But that is the story that proceeds Kajan of the Beautiful Lands, which is actually really brilliant because you sort of emerge from that story with a bitter dose of reality, and then you go into something a little bit of the opposite. It's very, very, very I thought very clever that they proceeded Kazan of the Beautiful Lands with the District Doctor. I thought it was quite clever. But anyway, we go into one of my favorite stories, works of fiction I've read this year. Kazan of the Beautiful Lands. And we open with this man. He's hunting in the countryside. I mean, there's so much to be said about this. And he's traveling with this carriage rider who's a bit of a cranky, jaded old guy, you know. He's like, whatever. And they're about to cross this funeral procession. And the guy's like, the driver's like, oh my god, we gotta hey, whip up the horses, giddy up, we gotta get past this because it is not good luck to pass a funeral procession. And lo and behold, the carriage actually breaks down. The axle breaks on the carriage. So the carriage completely crumbles and they're stuck having to, I believe it goes like this. The procession is like down this hill and they're going like this way and they want to like cross them before, but then the axle stops and then like the procession meets them in an intersection like that. So they encounter this procession and it's these 4 men carrying the casket, and then behind them is the wife of the deceased and the mother of the deceased, and the wife is lamenting some sort of she's singing this sort of lament, and she stops her singing when she passes the 2 men. I can't remember if she like nods to them or she does kind of I don't think she acknowledges them. I think she just sort of stops singing and keeps going forward. Anyway, that detail doesn't really matter. I think this is the sort of story where you can pick apart a lot of the details. And that's sort of one of them that you can sort of dissect, but also I think you can ignore completely. But I don't know, I'm not like big into literary theory and I don't know much about it, but I think that's sort of one of those things that you can examine, because I think the story is full of a few of those. So anyway, the axle breaks. And there's this interaction between the main character and the driver where he's like, yeah, what are we going to do? The driver doesn't, like, hardly just talks to him. He's sort of in his own head trying to, like, yeah, it's whatever. You know, it's a sort of thing that happens to him commonly, which I imagine it does. And he's like, all right, well, there's a few towns we can go to. There's the nearest one here. We'll just go there. It's like, all right, fine. So they managed to make it there. I think they like, drag the carriage along, like they're still riding the carriage, and it's just like stuttering, and basically they're dragging the thing with the horses. So they go to this town. It's completely barren. There's like some what is it called? Emaciated animals, like a dog and a cat. And then this middle of this town is this like figure, face first in the dirt, like almost prostrating. Stop. Is that actually the word? Yes, thank you. Oh my god. God forbid. He's almost prostrating. I didn't even realize that detail, but now that I think about it, he does do that, doesn't he? And which says a lot about the sort of man that he is. And our lead comes up to him. I don't think he has a name. He comes up to him and he says, hey, like, axle's broke. Do you know anyone who could fix an axle? Or can you do it yourself even? And this guy just has got this nasty attitude. He's like, just go away from me. Like, I am not involved with you. I'm doing my own thing. But, you know, he insists, like at least show me a town. Like, I need some help. I don't think this is the exact details of the exchange. You can read it yourself and see, but something like this. And this guy goes, oh, all right. And he comes to the carriage and sees the damage. Actually, the driver recognizes him, the cab driver. The carriage driver recognizes him. He's like, oh, Kazan, you know, what's up? My friend. Looking very chipper today, very homely today. Yeah, whatever. Kazan gives him like a little bit of an acknowledgement. It's Kazan is sort of like a bit in a daze, I think, at this point. He's just kind of going through the motions. But I think he earnestly does want to help the two of them. So, God, what else happens? I'm trying to remember, like, I can't remember it, like, frame for frame. I'm just getting some other details. But eventually, like, the main character's like, oh yeah, I'm here for hunting. I'm here for hunting. And the cutscene's like, what the? It's like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, this is like, such a character. Like, he. There's a sequence where they're both hunting, the main character and Kazan, and like it's absolutely dead silent the whole time, and then all of a sudden he starts whistling with the birds. He sings with the birds. Like that's all he does. And then out of nowhere he'll just start talking about going on this rampage. What he's supposed to be, I think, from what I've read, is he's supposed to be this holy fool sort of character. Like he reminds me a bit of King Lear, which is a story I haven't read in a while, but like when he turns full, it's a little bit like that. He has this sort of clarity and view of the world that doesn't make sense on its surface and not the sort of natural conclusion that one would arrive to, but when he puts it in a more transcendent perspective, it does make sense, and you sort of find yourself like, and it's said by other characters as well. They say this specifically, like he has like this grasp of the world that other people don't, but it's not something that's completely witless. His conclusions that he arrives to, like they have their own sort of logic, and devoid completely of any sort of logic that we know. It's like his own divine logic and the way he intuits the world. Like it's very, very, very captivating, and you find yourself like, at least for me, every word he said, I was just like latching onto, and that's the sort of character that Turgenev creates, and it's very, to make a character like that, very ambitious, but he makes it seem so effortless. Does it with such ease, and very convincing. So, what a splendid character Kazan is. I mean, I could muse about him on and on. Maybe I'll make some sort of deeper analysis of the work, but it does involve some more knowledge of Russian history, because there's a little bit of esoteric influence and that sort of thing, and the Orthodox influence, and I mean a lot of historical. And this, I will just say, this short story was said, according to the Penguin's Little Black Classics. That's what this collection's from. These haunting accounts of rural Russia and its downtrodden inhabitants helped to abolish serfdom in 1861. So I think what had shocked me about that was that I expected this story, when I read that description, to be something very depressing, sort of like the District Doctor was. It was rather rather bleak, but I think the appeal of Kazan from the Beautiful Lands is that you want to read it, like you admire his austerity, you admire the sort of man that he is, and that's the trick of the holy fool, is that they will look insane, they'll look a mess, they'll look absolutely in dire straits, but they convince you. I mean, not convince. They live their life with absolute ardor and passion, and it's they're not as downtrodden as they appear to be. They have this hope, and you think like, these are the kind of people that give life its meaning. Like, these are the sort of people who, when you're in your worst rut, these are the sort of people you will lean to, and that will help you regain your spirits. So that's why I really like Kazan, and I think that's the appeal of him. Not that you sympathize and feel, not like a what's that work by Upton Sinclair, The Jungle or whatever, like absolutely disgusting, like horrible accounts of things that happen, but it's like the exact opposite, which you probably would not expect from Russian literature. It's but actually the more you read about Russian literature, you should ought to expect something like that. But it's finding the humor and the joy in all this misery, like, and realizing that what other people perceive to be miserable, it's just someone else's life, and they live with no regard to, the pressures that you might have if you're more fortunate. So I think that's really what drove people to sympathize with a character like Kazan, and you think like, okay, like, it takes a certain person to see that light in life. And we're not all meant to see it. Well, I suppose that's not true. It's a little bit complicated because it's not that it paints serfdom as a good thing. It paints the idea that serfs are provided just as much or even more value to life as their position allows them to see more about the true value of life and what's worth living. And I think that's sort of the thing that, going back to Wolf and Wit, that Grobodov does with Liza. She's the smartest character in the play. She sees the most, she knows like everything, she's like, and that's the thing, it's, these people in these positions, they're smarter than their position would deign them to. You would assume they would be given their position, right? Like, you don't want a smart serf. You don't want a smart serf, you want one that does whatever you want, right? Like, well, I guess that's not true. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but anyway, they gain wits and they gain spirits that you could not even imagine. So it's like, what are we doing here? Anyway, that's what I think is the effect of that short story was, because given what occurs in it and the sort of things that you glean from Kajan as a character, his beautiful view of the world and how much he protects the sanctity of the things that he believes in. He takes care of this young girl, and he makes a deliberate effort to take care of the world around him, nature. He respects nature very much, and he chastises the main character for being a hunter. Even though he himself collects, nightingales in the spring in the Caucasus or something. He's just some bizarre pastime, and he has his own justification for it, but it's really interesting. Anyway, please read that. So the next thing I have, this is my transitory work between December and January. I hope to finish this by the end of December, but I imagine I probably will not. It is Titus Andronicus. So I've been meaning to read this for a while, particularly for one specific scene. There's a few really grotesque ones, but when I finish this, I want to make a worthless video about it, because honestly, so many more brilliant scholars will have covered this anyway. So it won't matter what I say, but I'll make a video on it anyway and clarify what I mean when I say that. Anyway, I just started reading this. My knowledge of Roman history is very cursory, so I will be having a lot of blockades. This is sort of, with these Shakespearean works, it's quite short, actually. It ends... Yeah. It ends... This is... Oh my god, I just lost it. This is the bulk of, this is actually where the work is. This is a preamble for some lines and things that occur in the manuscript. Some things are omitted, and some things are in brackets as if they were omitted but then re-entered. I didn't bother to read it. This is the bulk of the work, and it's appendix in the back. This is how it is formatted. So you can see the actual text of the plays here, but then these line by line annotations are here. You can't really see a thing about it, but I'm not giving this to you to read. I don't know if they would probably lynch me. But anyway, that's that book will take me longer than it may seem, because when you read these sort of things, you're often reading the same page over and over again, the same lines repeatedly. So I imagine it'll take me over to January. And on the note of January, I have some books to be read by that month. The first of which I don't have a physical copy of. I don't know if I ever will get a physical copy of this. It's The Duel by Alexander Kuprin. I'm reading it for a book club. I think it's an Eastern European literature book club. I've never heard of this. I would have never read it if they weren't reading it themselves. I like a good duel. I wanted to talk about something about the duel between Vladimir Zelensky and Eugene Onegin, and how I felt compared to the duel between Krushinsky, I think his name is, and Pechorin and what is that? Hero of Our Time. Very, very different duels. I think those two books are so interesting to compare to one another because they're like sort of Byronic inspired tales about the same sort of subject, Moscow high society. I mean, the settings are so different though. And, well, are they really? I mean, it's interesting. The setting of the Caucasus really dictates the Hero of Our Time, so I think it is a little bit different in that way. But Pushkin also plays with the countryside setting, but it's not really the same. I just found there were similar events that occurred. I mean, people were not doing a lot of things in that time anyway, so I mean, it's bound to happen. I think it would be interesting to compare the two of those works. I don't know. Maybe I'll do that someday. Anyway, the duel by Alexander Kuprin. I don't know anything about this. I'm going with no expectations, and I think it's better that way. I'm always constantly blown away by how I expect a work to be and what it really is, and always taken aback by what exactly is going on, and the many layers and things you can peel back and examine. Anyway, that's the duel. I don't have a physical copy of it, unfortunately, and I know nothing of it, so not much I can say. The next thing I have is a short story by Lev Tolstoy, How Much Land Does a Man Need? I think another thing I know nothing about, only that it says on the back of this book, a parable of Russian peasants' bargain with the devil, considered by James Joyce to be the world's greatest story. I don't know if he continued to say that throughout his life, Mr. Joyce, but he did at one point believe that, so I am very much looking forward to figuring out why he thought this story in particular was the world's greatest story. There's also, it's quite short, and there's another story in here, What Men Live By, so I'll be reading that as well. I'm very interested to see how this goes, and I've been looking forward to reading this. I've had to stop myself multiple times from reaching for it because Titus Andronicus was a bit of an ambitious read for me. So I always want to fall back into reading a short story or something a little bit more indulgent. But I'm saving this for January. I think this is a January must read, and I'll tell you why later. Anyway, the next thing I have here is Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov. Now, I read Lolita very, very long ago. It must have been, God, probably like 10 years ago. I read Lolita, and I just fell in love with Nabokov's prose, and I haven't read him since. I wanted to get my hands on Pinion, but I never could. The only thing I got was Pale Fire, and I do have something else. What is it called? Oh, here it is. I got the Waltz Invention. I think this is some... I'm not going to say that. Not a lot on this. That's all I'll say. Pinion I hear a lot about. Pale Fire I hear a lot about. The Waltz Invention, absolutely. I think this is originally written in Russian. Anyway, I'm reading this. I've read a little bit of it. Hardly anything, however. And I'll show you how this book is formatted. The work itself, rather short. This is it. And this here is all the commentary. So, someone who does not study literature, I'm very excited and very scared. Very excited. I'm very excited to see how this goes. I hear so much about Pale Fire. Nothing but great things. I hear it's a bit of, from what I've read and what I've heard, it's a little bit obscure. And there is an analysis video on YouTube that I do want to watch on Pale Fire. So I'm kind of looking, I think I might just As soon as I'm done Andronicus, I'm gonna go right into Pale Fire. And some other... I'll do this. Okay, I'll do this next. On the topic of how much land does a man need, talking about Deals with the Devil. Next read for next month is I have to finish Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. I have to finish it. I don't say that because I don't enjoy it. It's really good. In that it's very layered. But that's my problem with it. It's very layered. I feel like you can read it casually, but I feel if you read it casually, you miss a lot of things. And I began reading it as rather casual, and then I realized there's a lot more depth to this than I really thought it would have had. I was really taken aback and a little bit intimidated, to be honest, because at the time I read hardly anything of Russian literature. I just finished Eugene Onegin right now. I mean, I finished it yesterday. And, Gogol I hadn't read, and now that I'm dipping my toes in and getting a taste of Russian literature, I feel more comfortable to go back to Master and Margarita, but I feel also there's a lot of nuances and references that are involved. He also there is a scene in Master and Margarita that within the first 100 pages where it details the meeting between Jesus Christ and Pontius Pilate, I think his name is. That goes to show my knowledge of biblical events. I really don't know much about it. And it was just... That scene was so rich in many things. I mean, you can tell because... Well, this is the PNV translation. So they annotate, pretty much everything. Everything's, annotated. And they give you a little bit of context on what exactly is happening between that interaction and how sort of it's perceived, I guess. It gives you that, it sort of makes that connection for you. And I think that's a great shame because while I do think I need it, as someone with limited understanding, I think I miss out on perhaps coming to my own conclusion. That's my fear with reading this, but the thing is, I talked to a few Russian people, that's everyone loves this book. So, I had to just trudge through it, I think. I had to trudge through it. I have to, I think, come out with at least a cursory understanding, preliminary understanding, and then eventually, once my knowledge becomes more developed, I can return to it and appreciate it for what it fully is. But I think now I'm just going to have to do the base level thing and just read it throughout and get an idea of the synopsis, which is a shame. I feel like I'm missing a lot. I also haven't read Faust, so I missed that too. But here's my non-Russian literature read for January 2026, and that is Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, I started this in October, and you might be thinking, well, you got through none of it. What I stopped reading was after Jonathan Harker. And because, I just miss Dracula and I miss Jonathan Harker. I miss Romania. I miss it so much. And then you go back to England with, what's her name? Mina? And the girl, and she's getting engaged to 4 different guys. I understand, this is just the nature of a story like this. You'll get your payout, and a lot of tremendous things happen in this book. But oh my god, when you open it with something like that, for someone like me, it just touched everything that I needed. I needed a creature, a man crawling on the cobblestone tower, just in his cloak, flies from his cloak, calling upon the wolves, the creatures of the night. And he's tormenting this poor man, this Englishman, Jonathan Harker, who's grasping for his life in this, and he's being pulled and by all forces. The veritable prisoner, Jonathan Harker. I mean, Jonathan also just writes so splendidly, and Dracula's all his overtures, all of his recountings of the house Dracula and all its glory. Oh my god, I was just like absolutely fell in love with these characters, and then they're just ripped from me in the most brutal way. But like I actually liked that they were ripped like that. I think it was so like cathartic to the story because like he discovers Dracula in that I don't know if it's the last time. I don't know if he's dead or alive. I'm assuming he's dead. I'm just for the sake of what I feel like the reader should be assuming. I'm assuming he's dead. I'm not gonna read any further into it. And then the last time he sees Dracula in the coffin is just, and then the basement just collapses in. I mean, absolutely brilliant. And if that were a short story, that would have been my favorite short story of all time. I thought it was just so splendid. I love the history. As a Slabophile, I love the history of it. The little House Dracula bits. The history of the land. Oh my god, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. I loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. Oh, I love Dracula. What a guy. Oh my god, and the woman with the infant, she's like, give me back my child. He's like, oh my dude. And he calls the wolves. I just think he's such a guy. Like, I just think he's such a great guy. What a fun character. I mean, ah. Yeah, but then, you get the marriage proposal in England or whatever. So, I don't know. I've been slogging through it. I'm also trying to do this thing where I read a chapter of War and Peace every day. I haven't done it yet. I'm just thinking about doing it. But I haven't done it yet. But I think I should. I really should. But I've just been slogging through Dracula and I can't find myself to go back. Especially after picking up Eugene Oregon and Wilfred Witt. Those books, just right through them. And I couldn't stop reading them. And I couldn't go back to Dracula after reading Pushkin. So I hope I can finish Dracula next month. We'll see, though. I think I might be called to other things. But anyway, that's my wrap-up, I guess. And then the next thing on the agenda is making a video on Titus Andronicus once it's over. Which I think there'll be a lot to be said. I think there's a lot of grotesque and notable things that occur in this book. I would also maybe like to write something about Eugene Onegin and Hero of Our Time. And comparisons between them. I really am a Tom lover. I like his poetry more than I like his prose, though. I like the Hero of Our Time more after I had read it. During when I was reading it, I was just I was coming in and out. I think Patron is just grotesque, and some things about I like a grotesque character, but there's a little bit too much for me. But I think that's the purpose. He played his role extraordinarily well. Anyway, I just miss Dracula. I want to see more of Dracula. I want Dracula to talk more, and that's really where I'm ending this ad. I just want to say, like, Dracula, I'm waiting for you. So that's it.